Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
They are not even just a number. There's no official data showing how many people in the UK have died while homeless. But the Bureau of Investigative Journalism has begun counting. Their figures show that since October, more than 78 people have died as they record the deaths and the stories of the people involved. This programme is collaborating with the Bureau, and tonight our Home Affairs correspondent Andy Davis reports from Essex on the death of just one of those 78 people, a homeless man who'd spent the last months of his life living in a car by a supermarket car park.
In the freezing cold of late February, they left the flowers. Not at his home, he didn't have one, but against the windscreen of the car he'd once lived in. Hamid Farahi spent his last months living in cars, and his last days sheltering from the snow in a low-budget hotel room. So Hamid had been here for 5 or 6 nights?
Six, 7 nights, yes.
Nav Hussein, as we discover, found Hamid's body. He's the hotel manager who'd booked him in under the council's emergency cold weather provisions. When a friend called worried about Hamid's whereabouts, Nav went to check on him.
When I knocked the door, I didn't get a reply, so I opened it, I went inside. As I took it first step in the room, so I found his shoes next to the bed. I thought, oh, he's in the room. So I knocked the door and I said, Mr. Fry, are you in? I didn't hear nothing. So as I went in, he was sitting on the left-hand side of the bed. I thought he's sitting, but when I see, I called him actually, Mr. Fry, are you okay? And I didn't get any reply. So when I see his hands color, it was a little bit different. And I realized that, find out that he's dead. So I have to call the ambulance.
They found him sitting hunched over the corner of his bed, a half-empty bottle of alcohol beside him, apparently marijuana too. He died aged 55, homeless and alone. We wanted to learn more about Hamid Farahi, so last week we came to Harlow in Essex, where we found his car still parked up by a Tesco's car park where he'd left it back in February, still adorned in flowers, albeit dead and dried out in the April heat wave.
He used to joke, he said, this is my front room, this is my kitchen. So we start laughing about that, so yeah. He says, oh, I think like that's the bit that he used to use there. That's exactly where his feet went, where that cardboard is.
Chrissy Sauce from the neighbouring car rental firm became friendly with Hamid, so too Beckham Sabani from the nearby car wash. What did he do during the day?
He walks, he goes on town, comes back, stays in the car, reads. He's got a lot of books in his car. He used to read a lot.
Inside the car, remnants of a life cut short. Beside the faded personal journal, a still intact, discoloured packet of ham. His modest possessions crammed in amidst the debris of many a forlorn hope.
He loved scratch cards. He'd buy a scratch card, I forgot about that. I was obsessed with him. So he had a dream, didn't he? Bless him.
Perhaps his biggest dream, we learn, had been to work with the renowned physicist Stephen Hawking, who died this year 2 weeks after Hamid. Hamid kept this cutting of a Cambridge University job ad from 1997. So too the letter acknowledging his application to work as an assistant to Professor Hawking. He made the shortlist, he later told friends. Among them, latterly, this local resident.
He had a lot of books, you say?
He did, yeah. He was very well read. Number of books on philosophy, all sorts of physics and quantum mechanics books.
It was a remarkable change of fortune, said one former close friend, who took these photos of Hamid when on holiday in Laos together 12 years ago. He knew him as a soft-spoken refugee from Iran, a veteran of the Iran-Iraq War, a PhD student whose intellect brought him work in the avionics industry, but whose personal difficulties, including the death of a partner and PTSD, saw him increasingly marginalised. a growing dependence on alcohol, drugs and antidepressants, plaguing not just his own life, but others too.
Letters for Hamid.
Barry Humphreys gave Hamid a floor to sleep on 2 years ago. That was after Hamid was evicted from his social housing flat, due seemingly to antisocial behaviour. And when he came here, just talk me through, his routine.
Well, his routine was start drinking at 5 o'clock in the morning, drink all day, and then fall asleep. I think he just drank just to get rid of all the problems, literally. Blot them out of his memory. That's why I think he took to the drink. And it was quite sad, to die alone. Not good.
And so we encounter yet another story of someone dying homeless in Britain, but with little to no sense of how this particular story fits into the bigger picture. Because what is that bigger picture? How many deaths of homeless people have there been in recent years? And if the figure is rising, then at what rate? The truth is, no one really knows. When we reported on Lindy Pring's death in a park in Cardiff last November, the council confirmed she was the 21st homeless person in the city to have died in the last 3 years. But not every council counts. And at a UK level, it seems no government department is systematically logging such deaths. Today, the Bureau of Investigative Journalism is launching an initiative to try to change that, to count those dying homeless on UK streets. At Channel 4 News, we'll be working with them, trying to build a picture of who they were and how they died. Already their figures suggest that at least 78 homeless people have died since last October. That's 2 a week on average. The vast majority men, the youngest 19, the oldest 68. The deaths occurred on the streets, in temporary accommodation, or in hospital after people were found ill rough sleeping.
So there's no national information available, either in England, Scotland or Wales, about the numbers of people who die on our streets. The tragic reality is that we know a number of people do, maybe as much as once a week, and when the weather's very cold that number goes up. But there's no obligation on local councils to undertake a kind of investigation or look into why somebody may have died on our streets. And that's a really important missing piece of information, because without that we won't learn the lessons and prevent it from happening again.
And if there is a lesson from Hamid's death, says the homeless charity which was working with him, then it's about better understanding the complexities behind such a death, as well as the need for fresh thinking on how to reach those at times reluctant to engage.
Well, luckily he didn't die on the streets. He was in a hotel room when he passed away, but I really do think, it's not just with Hamid, it's a growing issue with the alcohol misuse. We really do need to have some more supported accommodation around these issues.
The precise cause of Hamid Farahi's death is still being investigated. His was once a busy and focused life, rich in ambition, reduced in the end to that of a weary, ill and frustrated spectator. Unrecognisable, said his friend, from the person he'd so admired before. And another to die homeless in Britain.
That report from Andy Davis. Now, if you want to know more about our collaboration with the Bureau of Investigative Journalism and can contribute any information about the people we're trying to count, please go to channel4.com/news. Well, joining me now is Mark Johnson, a former rough sleeper and founder of the charity User Voice, Dominic Williamson from the homeless charity St Mungo's, and Dr. Zana Khan, a GP who works with homeless people in London. Dr. Khan first. Let's be clear, some people might think, well, everybody dies. These are not people just dying in the normal course of things. They're dying prematurely, aren't they?
They are indeed, yeah. And there is no, as your piece showed, no routine recording of homelessness or homeless status. And that's important because homeless people do die prematurely. They experience extreme health inequalities. They have very high rates of morbidity and mortality compared to the housed population. I know we don't have the data, but from your experience,
what are they dying of? What are the problems that homeless people have particularly that need tackling?
So the things that we see in clinical practice are mirrored in the research findings. So we see patients dying from suicide, from severe addictions problems, severe mental illness, overdoses, for example, but also infections and preventable diseases that everybody else gets, cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, that are affecting homeless people at a much earlier age.
Mark Johnson, I mean, you've lived this yourself. I mean, what support is there, and in your experience, is it going up or down?
Well, it's definitely gone down. I got off the streets in 2000. What was sort of instrumental in that was community action. So there was action team workers from, I think, Turning Point at the time, trawling the streets, all of the alleyways, and offering a safe place to stay. And I went to a roll-in shelter where you could... There was no sort of conditions about stopping drug use or anything like that. It was just like sort of containment. And then later on, I was offered drug treatment. And I went for 1 year residential drug treatment. To get that now is impossible. There'll be no more sort of Mark Johnson stories to come because the funding's being cut to such a level. Rolling shelters, residential drug treatments being cut astronomically, where they've turned into sort of information-giving services rather than actual, you know, a place to go where you can have every issue peeled away in a very therapeutic environment and come back to life. Yeah, that's all gone.
Dominic Williamson, I suppose people imagine that this is something that happens at winter. You know, people think about homelessness on the streets at Christmas and then forget about it the rest of the year.
Well, I think, you know, we're really, really pleased that this initiative's taken off. We think it's really important, not only that we count the numbers, but that we really learn from every instance when somebody dies. So Mungo's is calling on the government to ensure that there's a proper local review in any case when someone who's sleeping rough dies on the street or soon after moving into accommodation. There's a proper review done of the care and support that person's got. It's the kind of thing, if somebody died in a care institution, for example, like a learning disability home, there'd be a proper review by the local authority, we're saying, asking the government to do that in every case when a rough sleeper dies. And from that, we'll learn what's missing in the local area.
But how do you stop them dying? What needs to happen?
Well, that's the priority. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that need to be done. I mean, as Mark said, lots of money has been sucked out of the system over the last few years. Rough sleeping has gone up 169% across, that's the government figure, 169% over the last 5 or 6 years. The government has accepted, and government ministers are saying they now want to do something about it, and we're getting a sense that they really want to move quickly. There's a lot that needs to be done.
I have to ask you, while you're with us, do you have the trust of homeless people, as you know, as an organisation, as St Mungo's, because you had to admit recently that you'd worked with the Home Office on the hostile environment policy.
Our outreach workers are going out every night, and we're helping thousands of people off the street into our hostels and so on. So we build that trust, and as Mark said, you need people who will go out onto the streets and build a relationship. In the case that we heard of just now, a tragic case, we don't know what sort of help that man was willing to accept. But our outreach teams are very skilled at working with people, often over many, many weeks, to get that engagement and help them, encourage them to move indoors and to accept the help they need from the services.
Dr. Khan, I mean, what would make your life easier? What would stop people dying at these rates?
So, as Mark's articulated, we're managing patients with very complex needs, physical health, mental health, often addictions problems, and we need coordinated care to really work with patients effectively. I'm lucky enough to work in a service that includes mental health OTs, social workers, nurses, GPs, but we also need...
that is coordinated care.
That is coordinated care, but it doesn't exist everywhere. It needs to be rolled out on a much bigger scale, and we also need places of care where we can move patients onto. So places that Mark's described, where complex needs can be addressed, not just stopgaps or temporary accommodation as the man who died in your piece experienced.
Mark, if they put you in charge of this, what would you do?
Well, firstly, number one is provide suitable accommodation. Yeah, for the physical number of people that are homeless. That's number one thing, and that would take a massive proportion of people off. So working with...
By which you mean homes rather than hostels?
Literally boxes, you know, where you've got a bed and a sink and somewhere to cook your food. That's number one. There has to be a provision of there. And then it literally goes down the scale to what you're talking about into clinical treatment of people, because the reasons that they're there in the first place need to be addressed. But homes is number one. The other thing is around... it's really good to see, actually, that this year, especially through winter, like public opinion changing as well, of realising when you see somebody at a Tesco's or on the street, more people are understanding that there's a reason behind it, and they're not just like criminalised or demonised through the, what the media's done around shirkers or drug addicts or the councils which have got these policies around educating the public around professional begging, look, I think public opinion's changing around it, which is good to see.
Well, we must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Mark Johnson, Dominic Williamson and Dr. Zara.